and the drivers' press conference, and Group 2 this afternoon we have Lance Stroll and George Russell. Welcome, guys. Good to see you both. Lance, why don't we start with you? You dragged out a good result, P10 in Bahrain, but how good is this year's car?
Well, it's it's not as competitive as last year's car, relative to the others. That's for sure. I think we did a good job to score a point in Bahrain. It was a tricky weekend for us, but it's early days. We have some ideas of what we can do to improve our package, so looking forward to this weekend.
How much potential has it got?
I think it has a lot of potential. The year is still young. We saw a lot of our weaknesses in Bahrain, and the areas that we need to focus on to improve on. We're going to start here in Imola, and like I said, it's a long season. Still very very early.
A lot has been made about the difference between the high and the low rate cars. What can you do in the cockpit to drive around the problem, or is it just a matter? Are you at the mercy of development?
No, it's purely load. I mean, there's characteristic differences between the two philosophies, I'm sure, when driving the car. But ultimately, what hurt us was the fact that we lost a lot of load relative to the high rate cars with the regulation changes. So that is, grip, and that is lap time.
Great. Thank you, Lance. George, coming to you. So what did we learn about Williams' pace at the Bahrain Grand Prix?
Well, not too sure, to be honest. As Lance said, it's still early days. It was a very bizarre weekend, very windy, very tricky. Bahrain is always a bit different to a lot of the other circuits. Racing in the evening, the tarmac is very abrasive. Reset here in Imola. Again, it's going to be probably on the opposite end of the spectrum, being very cold, fast-flowing circuit as opposed to a more slow speed of Bahrain. So, still early days. It was a tricky weekend. I think we optimised it in Bahrain, but looking forward to Imola and reassessing this weekend.
You say you optimised it in Bahrain. How much closer to the midfield are you?
I think the weekend in Bahrain, there wasn't probably a huge difference compared to last year. But I personally was quite vocal about the difficulties during the test and the race in Bahrain. So fingers crossed, when we get back to more normal circumstances, we can close that gap. But that'll be, time will tell.
And it's fun having you guys together in the press conference, because you're old rivals, particularly here at Imola, 2015, 2016. Do those battles give you fond memories of this place?
More for Lance than for me. This is where Lance won, and Lance won the championship.
I got fond memories of popping champagne back in 2016. Yeah.
We don't do much of that these days, do we? You more than me, anyway.
Great stuff. Now, as was the case in Bahrain, we have a fan question for you, and this is it.
Hi, I'm Irene. I live here in Imola, in the famous Motor Valley. I was wondering, when Sunday's alarm goes off, what are your first emotions thinking about the race?
Thank you, Irene. You hear that? So when the alarm goes off on Sunday, what are your first emotions about the race?
I think it depends where you're starting on the grid, to be honest. If you've overachieved in qualifying and you've got a chance of a great result, there's probably a bit more nerves and pressure compared to normal. If you've had a tricky Saturday, you're just looking forward to moving forward and optimising the race ahead. I think for me, the first thing I think about is making sure I'm not late to get to the track and making sure I'm waking up on time. So, yeah.
That was cute. My first thought when I roll out of bed is race day, Let's go get it. Let's go get it. That's it.
Great stuff. Well done, guys. Let's go next, please, to an email question. This one from Louis Decker at NOS. It's to both of you, and it's about track limits. He says, will this track, because of its nature, give less controversy in the race with regards to track limits? And what's your opinion on the track limit policy in Bahrain? What lessons were learned last time out? Perhaps we'll start with you this time, Lance.
I think here it's actually tricky with track limits, especially out of turn, the chicane, Variante Alta. I believe a couple guys got pinged last year for it, and I'm not sure what the story is going to be this year, but it can be tough through there. You're riding the curbs and that chicane, and it's not always easy to stay in the track limits. Bahrain was, I think was, pretty straightforward. You just got to stay, with your inside wheels on the red and white curb, and anything beyond that is outside of the track limits. That rule is consistent everywhere we go, and like I said here, with the nature of that corner being challenging, it is not always easy staying within the track limits, but everyone's in the same boat, and that's how it is.
Thanks. George, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this weekend will probably be slightly easier than in Bahrain. I think with regards to Bahrain, my opinion is that turn 4 is a great corner. It gives great overtaking opportunity on the outside, and if you see that as the natural line that all of the drivers are taking, then I think we need to almost adjust where that limit is. There isn't necessarily a reason that we need to paint a white line at that point in the track, and it promotes overtaking. It promotes a bit of a different line for drivers to take, adds a bit more character into it all. So, in my opinion, having that white line and that painted curb where it was last race in Bahrain was a bit of a shame, because, like I said, with that extra bit of tarmac, it does offer a lot of opportunity. And so I think moving forward, just need to think about that, and whether they literally just paint the line in a different area and paint it where the natural course we would drive on.
Thank you. Let's go to the video conference now, and we'll start with Christian Nimmervoll, please. Motorsport.com.
Thank you, Tom. George, you've shown last year in Bahrain of what you're capable of doing in a Mercedes car. And obviously, both Mercedes drivers have ending contracts at the end of this season. Now, in the case of Toto not being able to give you a Mercedes cockpit for 2022, is there any way you would be looking outside the Mercedes universe for a competitive cockpit?
I mean, Mercedes have been loyal to me since day one, so that isn't even crossing my mind at the moment. They have their faith in me. I have my faith in them, and time will tell. It's been clear since day one, since 2016, when I signed for Mercedes, do the job on the track, and the opportunities will come, and that's been the case through GP3, Formula 2. And then with my career in Formula 1, and obviously we signed the 3-year deal back in 2018. Let's wait and see. But at the moment, that thought hasn't even crossed my mind.
Thank you. Next up, please, Scott Mitchell from The Race.
Thanks, Tom. It's a question for Lance, please. Lance, obviously in Bahrain, I think Otmar was quite clear that the rule changes have really hurt the cars with different rates to the majority of the opposition. Obviously, that's yourselves and Mercedes. It sounded like it's worse than was expected. Is that the case? That when you reflect on testing and Bahrain, do you feel that you've been hurt more than expected by the rule changes?
Well, it's always hard to expect. How much you are, I think, going to be hurt. I guess another way of putting it is it's a relative game. So, I think we suspected that everyone would take a big hit from the regulation changes, and that is how it is for everyone. However, when we turned up in Bahrain for the first race, we definitely saw that we've been, affected much more than the competition.
Thank you. We'll go to a question submitted via video. This one from Matthias Brunner, please.
Matthias Brunner, speedweek.com. George, I was a tad surprised recently about a question to Toto Wolff about you and Lewis Hamilton allegedly no longer on speaking terms since you replaced him in Bahrain. I find it a little bit hard to believe, and Toto has said he had never heard of that one before either. So could you please set the record straight on that one?
I mean, I think the question towards me was, did you speak to Lewis after Bahrain? And no, we didn't speak, as we wouldn't speak after any other race. We are racing against each other. If we see each other in the paddock, we would speak, and we've seen each other this year. A little fist bump along the way, and that's been the same as it's been since 2019 and last year before the Bahrain Grand Prix. And the same, my relationship towards Lewis is the same as it is with a lot of the drivers up and down the paddock, which is completely fine. So there's no hard feelings or no issues between myself and Lewis.
Thank you. Back to the video conference now, and to Luke Smith from Autosport, please.
Thank you, Tom. Question for George, and sorry to bring this up. Obviously, Imola last year was a site of quite a low moment for you with your crash. When you come back to a circuit like this, how easy is it to put that out of your mind, completely forget about it, and just try and not make the same mistakes the second time around, I guess?
Yeah, I don't think it's a case of necessarily putting it out of your mind. I think you need to recognise these moments, and these moments make you stronger as a person, as a driver. And I cycled the track this morning, and I didn't get to that corner and look the other way. I think you've always got to face these disappointments in your career head on and recognise it and learn from them, which I've done since that mistake. And obviously back here this weekend, it probably wouldn't cross my mind once. And if the same situation arises in the race again, I'll still be pushing absolutely flat out, and the consequences of what happened last year won't be on my mind. I'm full beans ahead.
Thanks, George. We'll go to this email question next from Andreas Hout at Automotor and Sport. It's to you, George, and he says, this could be a good track for Williams, a track where you could find out if the philosophy of a peakier car is working. Considering that, would you prefer dry conditions, or is rain welcomed?
I think rain is always welcome in our position. It spices things up, and I think the mid to back end of the grid, you need a bit of spiciness in there to create opportunities. But I do think for us it would be nice to have a dry weekend, just to have two ends of a spectrum, to review how the car was in Bahrain, to see how the performance was in Imola. But nevertheless, we've got a 23 race season, and we're here to make the most of every single weekend. So rain is definitely welcome.
And for you, Lance, wet or dry this weekend? What's preference?
I wouldn't mind a bit of rain. Spice things up, Yeah, it's always fun.
And you've got a great record in the rain as well. Look, we've got time for one more question, and we'll give it to Scott Mitchell from The Race, please.
Thanks, Tom. Question for George, please. On the evidence of Bahrain, it looks like one of the team's closest rivals from last year, Alfa Romeo, has made one of the biggest steps on the grid this season. Do you think that the gap between you and Alfa in Bahrain was exaggerated by the Williams not necessarily being in the most comfortable conditions, or do you think that Alfa have made a genuinely big step, and are you surprised by that at all?
Tricky one. I do think those conditions in Bahrain went against us slightly, and I think they probably favoured Alfa Romeo more than most. So this will be an interesting test. I I'll be surprised if the delta between ourselves and Alpha are just as great this weekend. They definitely look very, very fast in Bahrain, but I think that was potentially a one-off. So this will be a good test for all of us, and I think, you know, this weekend and over the course of a season, that won't be the same gap as we saw in Bahrain.
Okay, thanks to both of you. That's all we've got time for. Best of luck this weekend, and thanks to Irene for her question. Thank you.